want to use your mic, it just
Yeah, we can't hear.
Okay, all right. Make his way here.
We can talk about the small things.
All right.
We can talk about the small
Sure.
things. I won't get into the nitty gritty until Adam comes, because I know that, I'm not gonna tell him I told you already, but this was his directorial debut, guys. So that's
True story. Adam, come on up here.
So I'm gonna try this again. This is Adam's directorial debut.
And this is a family story. Adam and Max are cousins. So this is a real personal story for both of them. And so it makes sense why Adam would tell this story. And I've been happy to be along for that journey.
Yeah, it felt very personal. It felt very close up and very candid. That's one of the things that I really appreciate about the testimonials, the interviews, like even like being in on the phone conversations. Something that I wanted to ask, you mentioned obviously that we watched a very, very long road. Max, we watched you bet on yourself so many times over the course of a decade. How does it feel to be that much closer to your goal after betting on yourself so many times? And team, talk about what it was like to watch him bet on himself so many times and get up to and to document it this way.
Yeah, well, for me, I would say that the way I look at things is kind of with blinders on. So you have a mission, you have to accomplish the mission, and you know, there's a saying, I learned this in the military from the mentors you saw on the screen there, that if you have an objective in front of you, an obstacle, there's three ways to get through it: over, under, or through. So it wasn't, this was a natural progression. I kind of realized that in life, if you throw enough shit against the wall, something will stick. And things that don't stick are kind of just the natural guides that dictate where you shouldn't have been, where you didn't belong. So it took a lot of no's to get to the right channels, and I think the clarity that I had in seeing what it took to make this happen really came from General Nagata, who you saw a few times throughout the film. When he kind of asked me the question, he's like, do you understand why the special operations community was so embracing of you and your attitude? And he's like, it's because you're relentless. And he started quoting this Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey, which is a really interesting thing. I won't get into that now, but that's when it kind of became clear to me that you just are given things that you don't understand why you're given those tasks until many years after the fact. So I don't really look at where I'm at as, I'm not really necessarily proud per se, because the job's not done. I try to stay grounded. My dad's still suffering every single day. My competition is the enzyme that's dysfunctional, that's causing this torture nonstop. So I feel very fortunate in that life has given me these opportunities to learn things that most people, quite frankly, don't learn until they're really on their deathbed. And I have no regrets. I wouldn't change it any other way. This is just, I refer to it as the dealer's day, which is the day when, you know, you're dealt a deck of cards and you don't get to control what cards you're dealt. All you can do is play the hand the best you can, the best you know how, and you know, this is just me playing the hand. And you know, you get a shitty turn, and then you just try to make something of it, and then you just keep using that to figure out where you need to belong. And that approach has just led me to find the people that have really been a part of this journey, that have helped me get to where I am. And now I'm, you know, very fortunate and honored to say that the team at Crazy Legs, this project, you know, they're very much a part of that journey now. So.
How many people have seen a problem and dedicated their whole life to fixing it, right? We see problems every day. I think, you know, 2020 and beyond have showed us a lot of problems in our society. And most of the time we feel fairly paralyzed by those problems. And when we heard Max's journey up until the time where we got involved, we're like, here's this guy who's doing something. Every single day he wakes up and does something to further his cause, to fix the problem. And that's such a unique person that actually can do that and can stick with it year after year. And yes, it's personal for him because it's his father, but that's a rare person that can really do that can stick with that problem. That's the reason we wanted to tell this story. I mean, a scientific story is not an easy story to tell in a film. It's also a complicated story. Most people who have taken some college courses have a hard time keeping up with his scientific journey. But the human story of trying to fix a problem and dedicating your life to fixing that is a worthwhile story to tell.
I certainly like this is the cell, this is where it's fucked up. And this is I was trying to follow along, and then when he did the diagram, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm caught up. I know where we're going now.
You're not alone.
Talk to me about, you said something in the documentary that I really appreciated. You said, at first I didn't know why this disease was given to my father. But now I know it was given to him because I was the person that has to figure it out. Something that I'm very big on is assigning purpose to experiences. There are no good and bad experiences. There are lessons and then there's purpose, right? I wanted to commend you, first of all, for saying that. And what other, did you find yourself assigning more purpose to that? Like, where do you see this cure, like once you find it, do you see it being something that, like a procedure that'll be given to everyone, a medicine that'll be given to everyone, or do you still steer away from like having an expectation?
Well, the thing I've learned with expectations, you definitely have to have expectation management, but at the same time you have to be very irrational, and you have to take intellectual leaps, and you have to have faith and trust that the leap that you're taking is one that's going to lead to something. Unfortunately, we are living in a time now where I would say progress in general is very iterative, and it's very derivative in that there are people that are, most people, unfortunately today, the rewards that they get, the accolades, the financial success, what have you, doesn't matter what business you're in, you're getting the reward for taking a very small leap, a very, very small step forward, not a leap, not this crazy, jump. You see this just with, technology, right? What's the difference between iPhone 13 and iPhone 14? There's really not much there. Now, Apple, of course, is making a ton of money on the difference between 13 and 14. You could apply the same logic to human medicine. The problem right now is that a lot of people make a lot of money on medicines that are working from the standpoint of, yes, they have a defined biological target, they have a defined molecule compound that's binding to something that's exerting a biological effect, but ultimately it's not really solving anything for the patient themselves, because the drug company is not concerned with solving the problem of the patient, because it's not their problem. It's not their problem. So the thing that I learned was, in medicine, the fact of the matter is every single person in this room knows somebody that has a disease. Every single person in this room, statistically speaking, is likely to get a disease at some point. It's just a fact. And oftentimes we try to ignore that because it's obviously a very uncomfortable thing to try to stomach. You don't want to think about someone you love or yourself having to come to terms with the fact that you're a mortal being. And I had to learn this at a very young age, starting at 7. And so where I'm going with all that is to say, the expectation for me from the moment I saw my dad first being tortured was that I was going to figure it out. I was going to solve it. The problem right now is that it's a problem and a solution, in that the fucked up molecule that we're talking about is what's referred to as an antisense oligonucleotide molecule, an ASO for short. Obviously, we didn't put this in the film because this is getting into a lot of technical stuff. But ultimately, these are short synthetic strands of synthetic RNA, ribonucleic acid, that are able to recognize in a sequence-specific manner a target sequence. So, you know, your DNA is a bunch of A, T, C's, and G's, right? And T binds to A and C binds to G. So if you know that this region of the gene has a sequence that's not functioning properly because it's regulating the gene in a way that shouldn't be regulated, which is what's happening in my dad's disease, as I discovered, you can design these molecules that can bind to a very specific region of that gene where the circuit breaker switch is that's causing the gene to be regulated the way it is. And you can actually regulate the regulator so that we can get the gene to form correctly. The reason he's not producing PHGH proteins is because the gene's not regulating itself the way it should. So that molecule is acting as a switch to get the gene to regulate itself the way it should. To be totally candid, the PHGH hypothesis is just that. It's a hypothesis. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that that's the cure for that's 100% causing my dad's disease. Science is like, you know, a court of law. You have a jury and you have a judge, and you have to develop enough evidence to prove a story, to prove a point. I am at the beginning of this story. You know, the ending of this film is the takeaway here is that I'm just now at the beginning. So my expectation is that, yes, we've shown that this mutation is causing a reduction in the amount of protein that should be produced. We have a molecule that we predict and has been shown in the first experiment to fix the way that the gene is regulating itself so it can produce more protein. And then I can say that, okay, now if that molecule produces the right amount of PHGH protein that should be there, now I need to say, okay, that's going to reverse the observation of what this disease is. That is now going to have some defined effect in the nerve, and we have not done that yet. So that's a work in progress. So, I mean, my expectation is that this approach of targeting the gene is the first line of defense. It's the fastest, quickest, safe to an effective therapeutic for my dad. The FDA has really been, to their credit, as a bureaucratic government agency, to their credit, they have been very forward-thinking in adapting the regulatory processes for rare diseases and these ASOs. My dad is what's referred to as an N of 1, you know, N being number of patients. You know, he, as far as we know, is the only person in the world that has this specific type of disease. So that makes the burden of proving the disease that much harder because of things like statistical significance. I don't have another person I can test this in. So that's why the hospital was so having an issue with this approach. Fortunately now, rare diseases in the N of 1 is starting to come into the fold where people are starting to see the value of curing these patients and treating these patients. And the takeaway is that, you know, people like my dad, their suffering is not for naught. You know, you can't make a human being that has my dad's mutation. He was just, you know, an unlucky guy. He inherited from both his parents, and as a result, he himself is a model system. His disease is a model system because in science, and specifically biology, your science is only as good as the question you can ask and the degree to which you can fuck up the system. So if you can't perturb the cell, you can't perturb the mouse, you can't perturb the organism, you can't figure anything out. As human beings are the same way. If you take a human being that's well-fed, sleeping well, living nice, of course you're not going to see who they truly are. You take that person, you put them in a stressful environment, it's the same thing with cells and tissue. So the hope is that we can understand the basic biology of how this disease is causing his nerves to die, because that in and of itself I think would be very valuable for just us understanding how nerves work in general. The second thing is obviously trying to develop a safe, efficacious therapeutic as fast as humanly possible. But in my mind, and this is something that a lot of people, I guess, you can clearly see that a lot of people don't possess this mindset. If I just developed the therapeutic and only focused on the therapeutic and offered my dad some kind of, you know, solace in his suffering, it doesn't really answer the question of why this happened in the first place. It's not answering the biology. That's not satisfying. So I hope that this story will make doctors and clinicians realize that, especially human beings that have rare disease and any disease, you know, every single patient is a story that needs to be told. It's not just their suffering and the effect it's having on their family, it's a biological story. And we need to listen to these patients, and we need to understand and study their biology. The problem is, this is not a scalable system. I mean, it's like a detective working a homicide case. How do you scale the number of cases that a detective can work? You can't automate this. So I'm hoping that I can dedicate part of my life to making sure that we change the model of how these patients are approached, because they are model systems, and we need to recognize that, and we need to empower them to understand that, because that in of itself, I think, can help a lot of patients survive, you know, their own suffering.
Absolutely said. Thank you.
Everyone following?
I got that one. Adam, I'd like to know, since this film, are you still following Max's journey?
I will forever be following Max's journey.
Like, are you documenting it, or is there going to be like a part 2 to what we see here today, or what is, I guess, how are you documenting it moving forward?
Until Alana tells me you're done, you can no longer make any changes, this is going to XYZ distributor or whatever, I will try to keep doing updates, because this is an ongoing story. And I think that's one of the appeals of it, is that it's not all said and done, completely retrospective, but we're in the midst of it. And I think even when I started following Max's story, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, I knew that a lot of the story was yet to be told, but I also knew that what he had already accomplished was movie worthy, and the rest is gravy. And I think he's sitting up here very humble today because, you know, he doesn't want to make any claims beyond what is scientifically proven, but I just want to reiterate the fact that, you know, no world-renowned specialist could even think of the process of how to figure out the first step, which is what is causing John's disease, which is step 1 before you can even figure out how to solve it. And I think, you know, there's still a lot to be told, and I would like to, as far as the part 2, I don't know. We'll see where the story goes, but there's definitely a lot that's yet to be done. Like Max said, this is kind of just the beginning. It's taken him 10, 12 years to actually get in a position with the resources and the mentors that he has in place to really now have a lot of momentum behind him. And that was kind of my goal with the film, is to just add to that momentum and get more people on his side. And obviously funding is a major issue with independent science, especially when you're focusing on specialized medicine. So